everyone, and welcome back. We're diving into a book today that's basically legendary, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's sold millions and millions of copies, but it's also stirred up a ton of controversy. Some folks swear by it. Others, well, let's just say they're not convinced. So today we're going to unpack all that and see why this book about money gets people so fired up.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. It's all about challenging the usual money advice we've always heard. Kiyosaki, the author,
Yeah.
he kicks things off with this fascinating comparison. His own dad, super educated but struggled financially,
Yeah.
versus his friend's dad, the self-made entrepreneur.
And that's where the whole idea of unlearning what we think we know about money comes in, right?
Exactly.
How many of us actually learned how to build real wealth growing up?
Right.
It was always get good grades, go to college, land a good job, but rich dad, poor dad. That's where Kiyosaki argues that traditional education often misses the mark when it comes to real world money smarts.
It's true. And the result is that many people end up stuck in this cycle, working for money instead of having their money work for them. And this is where he introduces one of his most famous and often debated concepts.
The difference between assets and liabilities.
Okay.
He challenges the traditional view of an asset. What most people think builds wealth. He argues that many are actually focused on liabilities, things that take money out of their pockets instead of putting it into ed.
So instead of getting ahead, they're kind of digging themselves a hole.
In a way, yeah. And get this, his prime example is something a lot of people dream of owning. A house.
All right, so let's unpack this whole your house is not an asset thing.
I gotta admit, the first time I read that, I was like, wait a minute. Is this guy for real? We're practically raised to believe owning a home is the ultimate goal.
Right.
But Kiyosaki just flips that idea completely on its head.
He does. And to illustrate his point, he uses this really simple but powerful tool.
Okay.
It's called a cash flow diagram. And he shows how, in most cases, a house doesn't actually make you money. Instead, it creates expenses, mortgage payments, property taxes, insurance maintenance, and on and on.
Yeah, it adds up.
It does. So while it's a roof over your head and, a place to call home when it comes to your personal finances, it's often acting more like a liability pulling money out of your pocket each month.
Which makes sense when you think about those basic definitions of assets and liabilities from the book. An asset puts money in your pocket. A liability takes it out. It's not about what the thing is. It's about how it works within your whole financial picture.
Precisely.
Okay.
So, for example, let's say you own a rental property and the rent you collect every month is more than all your expenses for it.
Okay.
Mortgage repairs everything.
Makes sense.
That rental property is working as an asset because it's giving you positive cash flow.
Yeah. Okay, I see where you're going.
Or imagine you start a small business like a laundromat. It takes work to run, of course. But if it constantly brings in more than it costs to operate, that's an asset. Same goes for stocks that pay dividends. Those payments are putting money right back in your pocket.
Whereas with a typical house, especially if you're still paying that mortgage, you're often in the red each month.
Exactly.
And look, I'm not saying owning a home is bad or anything. It's more about really examining those assumptions we've always had and looking at our money through a fresh lens.
Yeah, and that's key to understanding what Kiyosaki's getting at. He's not saying don't ever buy a house.
Yeah.
He's saying understand what it really means for your finances and make sure it lines up with what you want to achieve.
It's about being smart with your money, not just doing what everyone else does.
Exactly.
And this kind of leads into another point I found really interesting. The book's take on corporations and taxes.
Okay.
It was like this aha moment, realizing how wealthy people use the system to their advantage in ways we never learn about in school.
Absolutely. This is where it gets really fascinating.
Yeah.
Kiyosaki points out that corporations, even though they might seem like these big complex things, can actually offer some significant tax benefits. For example, corporations can deduct business expenses before they pay taxes on their profits.
So if a business owner buys a new computer for their work, they can often deduct that cost, reducing their taxable income.
Exactly.
But if you're an employee and you buy a new computer for work, you're paying for that out of your own pocket after taxes are already taken out.
Precisely.
Okay.
And the important thing to remember is this isn't about dodging taxes or doing anything shady.
Right.
It's about knowing the rules and using legal structures to your benefit. Kiyosaki wants people to be aware of these tools and strategies that you don't always hear about in traditional education.
It's like he's saying, hey, there's a whole different game being played here, and if you want to build real wealth, you got to learn how to play. He even uses that story of Robin Hood
Yeah.
to illustrate this.
Right. The idea with Robin Hood was taking from the rich and giving to the poor. But Kiyosaki argues that the rich have figured out how to play the game in a different way.
Okay.
They've learned how to use corporations and the tax code to legally reduce their taxes while still giving back to society.
It's not about cheating the system. It's about being financially smart and using it to your advantage.
Exactly.
So we're talking about a whole different way of thinking about money here.
We are.
But knowing the stuff is one thing, actually doing it, that's a whole other challenge.
It is.
And this is where Rich Dad, Poor Dad goes into those inner obstacles that can hold us back even when we get the principles.
Absolutely. Kiyosaki identifies 5 main obstacles that can really sabotage your financial success.
Okay.
Fear, cynicism, laziness, bad habits, and arrogance.
And of all of those, fear seems to be the one that really holds people back the most.
It's true. Fear can be paralyzing.
Yeah, fear can really stop you in your tracks.
It can.
And to illustrate this, he uses this really unexpected example, the Alamo.
It does. It's a fascinating choice.
Well, it is.
At first, it seems like a strange connection, but it makes sense when you think about it.
Okay.
So the defenders of the Alamo, they knew they were totally outnumbered, outgunned.
Right.
They knew their chances were slim,
Yeah.
but they chose to fight anyway.
Brave, but kind of reckless, no.
Well, they made a statement about courage, about standing up for what they believed in, even when the odds were totally against them.
Okay, so how does this relate to personal finance?
Well, Kiyosaki's point is, we shouldn't let the fear of losing money, of failing, hold us back from taking chances. Calculated risks, of course.
Okay.
The Alamo defenders, they knew they might fail, but they took action. In the same way, we shouldn't be afraid to invest in ourselves, education, a business idea, just because we might lose.
So failure is just part of the process.
Exactly. It's a chance to learn and grow.
And sometimes those mistakes are the best lessons.
That's right. You don't have to have all the answers right away.
So how do we get over that fear? How do we develop that rich dad mindset and start making bolder moves with our money?
One key is changing how we see failure.
Okay.
Instead of seeing it as a setback, think of it as a learning opportunity, a chance to grow.
Yeah.
Embrace the idea that you don't have to know it all right away.
I like that, changing your relationship with fear instead of letting it hold you back.
Exactly.
But what about cynicism? That's another big one Kiyosaki talks about, right? That feeling of this is never going to work, or the system's rigged against me.
Oh, absolutely. Cynicism, it can be a huge roadblock to financial success.
Yeah.
And, Kiyosaki argues it often comes from a lack of financial education.
Interesting.
When people don't really understand how money works, they're more likely to believe those negative ideas like, investing is just for rich people, or I could never start a business.
It's easier to be cynical when you don't feel empowered, I guess.
Right, but that's what Rich Dad, Poor Dad does. It challenges those assumptions and encourages readers to question what they think they know.
So education is key here. And not just traditional education, but really seeking out knowledge about money investing, being an entrepreneur.
It all comes down to becoming financially literate.
Right, empowering yourself to make smart decisions.
Exactly. Knowledge is power, as they say.
And that learning can come from anywhere, right?
Oh, yeah.
Books, podcasts, workshops.
Even just talking to people who are good with their finances.
That's so true. Surrounding yourself with the right people.
It can make a world of difference.
So we've covered fear, cynicism, but what about that third obstacle, laziness?
Yeah. Kiyosaki, when he uses that term, he doesn't mean it in a judgmental way.
Right. Well,
He's talking about that tendency to stay comfortable even when we know we could be doing more.
yeah, it's easy to get stuck in a rut.
It is. It's about that fear of putting in the work, of stepping outside our comfort zone and taking control of our financial future.
Instead of just accepting this is how it is.
Right, Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah.
It challenges us to break free from that and really design the life we want.
Financially and personally.
Absolutely. And that takes effort, dedication, a willingness to learn and grow.
It's a journey for sure.
It is, with its ups and downs.
And ultimately, it's about having the courage to chase those financial dreams.
That's what it's all about.
And that journey starts with a single step, right? Reading a book like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, taking a financial literacy course, even having an honest conversation about money with a friend or family member.
Exactly. The important thing is to start somewhere, take that first step, and keep moving forward.
So we've covered a lot today, challenging those traditional ideas about assets and liabilities, talking about overcoming fear and cynicism. What would you say are the 3 most important lessons from Rich Dad, Poor Dad so far?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
For me, the biggest takeaways are shift your mindset from working for money to having money work for you.
Love that.
Understand the real difference between assets and liabilities. An asset puts money in your pocket, a liability takes it out.
Makes sense.
And finally, embrace continuous financial education. Learning about money, it's not a one-time thing, it's a lifelong pursuit.
It's a journey.
It is.
Those are such powerful takeaways. After reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I started seeing things differently, even things like education and skills. Could those be assets too?
You're absolutely right. That's a brilliant observation.
Because they can generate future wealth, right? It's like that saying, invest in yourself.
Exactly. Kiyosaki really emphasizes that the most valuable asset you have is your mind.
Your ability to learn and adapt and grow.
Precisely, the more you feed your mind with knowledge, the more opportunities you'll see. It's about becoming financially intelligent, making decisions from a place of knowledge, not fear or guesswork.
It's like if you were climbing a mountain, you'd want to learn as much as you could about the best routes, the weather conditions.
Exactly.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
the same with building wealth. The more you know, the better prepared you'll be to navigate the challenges and reach your goals.
I love that analogy. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad, what's the one thing you hope listeners take away from this conversation?
For me, the most powerful message of Rich Dad, Poor Dad is that financial freedom is within everyone's reach.
It's possible for anyone.
Yes, anyone who's willing to challenge their assumptions, educate themselves, and take control of their financial future.
It's inspiring, really.
It is. It's not about some get-rich-quick scheme or magic formula. It's about changing your mindset.
And developing that financial intelligence.
Yes, and then consistently taking action towards your goals.
Even if someone doesn't agree with every single strategy Kiyosaki outlines, I think the book's main message about financial literacy and taking control of your finances, it's so important.
Absolutely.
It's a call to action for all of us.
It is to be more aware and intentional with how we manage our money.
Be the CEO of your own life, right?
Exactly. You have more power than you realize.
So for everyone listening, here's a little challenge. What's one small step you can take today to start building your own path to financial freedom? Maybe it's grabbing a copy of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, or another personal finance book. Maybe it's chatting with a financial advisor. Or maybe it's just deciding to learn one new thing about money every day.
Any one of those.
Whatever that first step looks like for you, take it. Your future self will definitely thank you.
Your future self will thank you for it.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, everyone.
It was my pleasure.
Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep exploring the world of personal finance.